Now we've created 3 additional layers here in the layers panel, but all of our content is still living on the background layer, and we need to change that. So let's start by putting content on the images layer. So let's select the only image on this page, which is the photograph here at the bottom. Just select that with a black arrow tool, the selection tool, and look here on the very right hand side of the layers panel. That little blue square, the blue corresponds with the layer color, and that indicates the selected items. So to take those objects and put them on another layer, all you have to do is click and drag. If you've ever used Adobe Illustrator, this is the exact same behavior as Illustrator. And now you see that the content has moved to the images layer. Not only did the little icon here on the right move up, but you also have another visual cue. That is the frame edge down here. If you remember before, the frame edge of this frame was light blue, just like all of these other objects. But when we moved it to the red layer, it's now highlighted in red. It's just a little thing, but as you work with layer documents, it's a nice visual reminder. So let's do this one more time and select this vector logo. We want to move this to the vectors layer, so we grab the proxy icon here, click and drag up to the vectors layer, and now you can see that it is on the green layer, the vectors layer. Let's do it one more time and we will have our file all organized. I'm going to hold the Shift key and click both of these text objects, and now that they're both selected, let's drag them up to the type layer. Now any new objects you create will be placed on your current active layer. So if you're going to draw more vectors, you would click the vector layer before you start drawing. So I mentioned earlier that placing content on separate layers can make it easier to organize your content, and can also be a nice way to separate essentially the design process from the editorial department. So by that I mean that writers and editors who might need to work on these layouts can really simplify things. For example, just click these eyeball icons and that will hide all of the other content. It doesn't delete it, it just hides it. So if we want to see just the images or just the vectors, we just click these eyeball icons on and off. Now if all of these layers were visible and I wanted to see just the type layer, an easy shortcut for that is to hold the Alt key on Windows or the Option key on the Macintosh and just click the eyeball icon that you want to see. With a single click, everything else is hidden. You can see just what you're focused on. Then, if you want to see everything back, you can turn them on individually, or again, you can hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click that eyeball again to bring everything back to visibility. Now, holding down that Alt or Option key as a modifier toggles the visibility, but we also have an option over here if we hold the Alt key on Windows or the Option key on Mac and click the layer name itself. So just hold that keyboard modifier and click the layer name, and you will instantly select all of the objects on that layer. In this case, it's just 2 text frames, but imagine if you had dozens of images on the image layer and you wanted to quickly select all of them to change an attribute such as the stroke or their drop shadow or their transparency. You could do that right here in the layers panel. Now the last thing I want to explain is the stacking order here. Whether you realize it or not, I actually did this on purpose. So we put the images layer very low in the stack because generally speaking, you're going to want image data, pixel image data like Photoshop files and TIFF files, to be lower in the stacking order. So the lower the stacking order, those things are on the bottom. The higher the stacking order, think of those things as being on the top. The other thing that you want to do is you always want to have vectors, as long as the design permits it, on top of your images. And ultimately, I really suggest trying to have a type layer that you put on the top of all of your documents, because it's a good habit to put type on the top layer. So I don't want to get into too much technical detail, but let me just mention that if you have type and any of the transparency effects that we're going to look at in a later lesson involved in the same layout, it's a very good idea to have your type, whenever possible, on the top layer. That way the type will not interact with any of the transparency or the drop shadows or anything like that, and your type will always output at crisp, clean vectors. It's a beautiful thing, and it will help you avoid most of the transparency problems that folks might run into.